Hi everyone! Thank you for watching our Who Lives in Indiana video. Today we're going to explore Indiana's wildlife, specifically mammals and birds. Watch until the end to learn about some fun activities to practice your identification skills and a way to help real scientists identify wildlife. With that, let's get started. Indiana is home to over 800 species of mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and mussels. Our wildlife can be found everywhere, including forests, wetlands, prairies, cities, and farms. No matter where you live, you'll find an animal somewhere. For example, anywhere you can find a tree, you'll find a tree squirrel. We have 4 species of squirrel native to Indiana, but the most common are the fox squirrel, gray squirrel, and red squirrel. Now, take a look at the picture on the far right of the screen. That is clearly a black squirrel, but I labeled it as a gray squirrel. That's actually not a mistake. Black squirrels are actually still gray squirrels. Black squirrels are considered the melanistic form of gray squirrels. That means they have more pigment in their skin and fur, making them look black. Bet you're frustrated by the common name gray squirrel now, huh? Let's move on to some slightly bigger animals. Raccoons and possums are very common in Indiana, but they're more likely to be active at night. They're nocturnal animals, whereas squirrels and rabbits are diurnal, meaning they're more active during the day. As you can see, raccoons and possums sometimes live in trees too, but you'll always find rabbits on the ground. Our biggest wildlife in Indiana include the coyote, red foxes, gray foxes, and white-tailed deer. Historically, bears and wolves lived in Indiana too, but as humans moved in and took up space, they were forced out of the state. Now, coyotes and foxes are easily confused from a distance, but up close look very different. Coyotes are brownish-gray in color, while red foxes are a bright orange-red, and gray foxes are mostly gray, with a little bit of reddish-orange worked in. All 3 of these animals are more active during twilight hours, and they can be found everywhere in Indiana. White-tailed deer are also active during twilight, and as adults are larger than coyotes and foxes. Male deer have large antlers on their heads during mating season. Let's switch to learning about some of our local bird species. Indiana is home to easily over 400 bird species, including our bright, colorful songbirds. Not pictured on the screen is our state bird, the cardinal, easily recognized by its bright red feathers. Other songbirds include the robin, with its bright red belly, and the blue jay, with its distinctive blue plumage. Indiana is also home to woodpeckers, all of which share similar black, white, and red coloration. Pictured on the left is our smallest woodpecker, the downy woodpecker. On the right is our largest, the pileated woodpecker, seen feeding its babies. Along the White River, as well as in ponds and other water bodies, you can find our waterfowl. Most often you'll see geese, which are not pictured, and mallard ducks. Mallard ducks are brown with their female, and brown and gray with bright green heads of their male. Often you'll also see our largest waterfowl, the great blue heron, fishing in the White River or flying up high overhead. Now that we know who lives in Indiana, let's talk about who eats who in Indiana. All living things need energy to survive, but how you get that energy can vary. Plants are considered producers, or autotrophs. They're able to produce their own food using energy from the sun. All plants are able to do this, including the wildflowers on the screen. Trees and ferns can produce their own food too. Now remember, mushrooms are not in the plant kingdom. They are not autotrophs or producers. They are actually consumers, just like animals. Animals are consumers, also known as heterotrophs. They must eat to survive. They cannot produce their own food. All animals eat, but what they eat varies. For example, white-tailed deer only eat plants, making them herbivores. Other herbivores include rabbits and squirrels, although a very lucky squirrel might find a bird's nest to steal eggs from. Hawks and owls are carnivores, meaning they only eat meat. Coyotes, raccoons, and possums are omnivores, meaning they eat plants and animals as part of their regular diet. Sometimes omnivore diets can vary depending on the time of the year. Plants are available during spring, summer, and fall, but not in winter, so omnivores might rely on meat more in winter than in other seasons that have more options available. Predators eat other animals. The animals they eat are called prey. You can figure out if an animal is a predator or prey based on what it eats, as well as who eats it. Herbivores are always prey for something, and they are never predators, since they do not hunt. This includes insects, squirrels, rabbits, and deer. Herbivores are also known as primary consumers, meaning they only eat plants, which are at the bottom of the food chain. Omnivores can be predators and prey, since they hunt animals to eat, but are often eaten themselves. This can include scorpions, snakes, raccoons, and more. Omnivores are secondary consumers, because they eat primary consumers as well as producers. Carnivores are always tertiary consumers, and are always predators and never prey. They hunt the lower levels of the food chain. Sometimes omnivores can be tertiary consumers. Coyotes, for example, can eat from all levels of the food chain, including producers. But nothing really eats coyotes. If we had bears and wolves in Indiana, that would be a different story, because they're big enough to hunt coyotes. This is an example of humans altering food chains. We've left out an important part of the food chain: decomposers. Decomposers turn the food chain into a circle. Bacteria, fungi, and insects break down dead organic matter from all levels of the food chain and turn them back into nutrients in the soil. These nutrients enable more producers to grow, which then continue to feed primary consumers, and so on up the food chain to the tertiary consumers. Food chains can be linked into a food web. Let's take a look at an example of an Indiana food web. The primary producer in this example is an oak tree, which provides food in the form of leaves and acorns. Insects and rodents eat the acorns and leaves. The rodents are then eaten by secondary consumers, in this case the snake and raccoon, and tertiary consumers, in this case the coyote and the red-tailed hawk. The insect is only eaten by secondary consumers, the robin and the raccoon. The coyote and hawk also eat the secondary consumers, the snake and raccoon. The arrows in this web crisscross, showing that each species can eat more than one thing to survive. Now, this is a very simplified web. In the real world, there will be many other producers available, providing further options for primary consumers to eat, and more options of primary consumers for omnivores and carnivores to choose from. Let's take a look at the same food web through the lens of something called trophic levels. Trophic levels represent the amount of energy produced by each level of the food web. Producers produce the most energy and provide the most energy of each level. Herbivores, or primary consumers, then eat the producers. Notice how the herbivore level is a little smaller than the producer level. This means that herbivores produce less energy than the producers, meaning they provide less energy to the next level of the food web. Each level gets smaller and smaller until we reach the top of the pyramid, which illustrates the carnivores, or tertiary consumers. In this example, to support one carnivore, it has to be able to eat 2 omnivores, which must be able to eat 3 herbivores, and so on. The trophic levels show that food webs are not very efficient. This means that energy is not equally transferred up the chain, meaning that a habitat can only support so many of each trophic level. Now that we understand who lives in Indiana and what they eat, let's move on to our activities. Go to our education website, the link is provided in the video description below, to practice your ID skills. Motion capture cameras were set up in Indiana forests and wetlands to capture photos and videos of our local wildlife. Identify the animals you see and categorize them based on what they eat and who eats them. Once you're an expert, you can help real-life scientists identify wildlife on their own cameras. Scientists from the Chicago Urban Wildlife Watch need your help in identifying the wildlife on their cameras that are stationed all over the city. Using the website Zooniverse, you can help them out and practice being a real scientist. If you're here for class, you were provided these links and an instruction sheet. If you just found our video, you can look in the description to find the link to Zooniverse. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.